Good evening and welcome. It is now 6:03 and the Governance and Policy Committee meeting of December 10th, 2025 is now called to order. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories on which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewa of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing no declarations of interest, I will now move on to the next item. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as distributed? Thank you, Trustee Morton. All in favor? Thank you. The agenda is approved. Tonight we have two recommended actions, and the first recommended action is the draft minutes of the Governance and Policy Committee meeting of October 29th, 2025. Can I please have a motion to approve the draft minutes of October 29th? Thank you, Trustee Brown. All in favor? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Our next item is our update on policy and procedure development and rescission of definitions policy and regulations policy on page 7 to 27, and I will now turn to Senior Manager Galen Eagle and Senior Policy Advisor Sharia Banerjea.
Thank you. As the subject says, we are providing an update on our policy and procedure development, and then we have a little bit of what I would call housekeeping in terms of the recommended action and the motion that we're recommending. So just a reminder that the Governance and Policy Committee has approved the recommended actions related to standardizing policy governance, including the adoption of the policy development process and procedure, and finalizing the system-wide classification and numbering framework for policies and procedures, and this direction was adopted by the Board of Trustees on December 1st of this year. So those recent decisions by the Governance and Policy Committee really have allowed us to lay the groundwork of the implementation of a coherent and system-wide architecture for policy governance. So just a summary of some of that work that I know many of you around this table are aware of, but I just wanted to summarize it for you. So that includes the board's adoption of both the policy development process and the procedure. We have finalized the classification and numbering system, confirming the 11 subject categories and the standardized numbering instruction. And you'll see it here in the report from the communications and community engagement subject line right down to the well-being line. This has been developed in consultation with policyholders and informed by feedback to provide clear classification and a system-wide accessibility. It was one of the really key important steps in moving ahead with our policy development. Public Affairs will now begin applying these identifiers as part of the reformatted policy and procedure register. So what I'm really excited to talk to you tonight, though, is the next steps in the work plan. So we've built a 5-year review cycle and a policy register, which we will be previewing to Admin Council next week. This will provide a very clear accountability structure for moving forward on a 5-year cycle, and will also complement the committee's work plan at this table as well. We're currently building policy capacity, including providing professional development to support the new policy. Senior leadership has initiated training to support their roles as policy holders and champions. We'll continue to be working with staff to refine and develop resources, and where needed, provide further training to support the development of policy writing and review skills. In fact, we've got one of these sessions coming up with the senior team next week as well. And thankfully, the regulations, so the committee recommended, as you would recall, both the adoption of the new policy and rescission of all remaining regulations. So staff continue to lead the work to consolidate 15 regulations into policy and 12 regulations into procedure. And we're working on, we're doing this in consultation with policy holders, and we are working currently on a March break deadline for this. So all of those regulations will will be put to bed, either transferred into policy or procedure, and that's a big step in moving ahead with coherence as well. So that is my report. We do have a recommended action, and if you would recall that as part of this work, it is recommended that 2 additional policies, regulations policy, which is in your Appendix C, and definitions policy be rescinded. They are no longer relevant under this new structure. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Senior Manager Galen. And I now would like to have a trustee that is willing to move the recommended action. Thank you, Trustee Morton.
I move that the Governance and Policy Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that the regulations policy and the definitions policy be rescinded and that the matter proceed to the Board of Trustees at its next regular meeting.
Thank you. The recommended action has been moved. At this time, we are open for questions and discussion. I will recognize Trustee Brown.
Thank you. Just some clarification under financial implications, where it says there may be additional costs associated with digital platform enhancements. Do you have any idea of which platform you're thinking of using? And I know it says may have additional costs, but how big of a project or an undertaking is this?
Thank you for the question. We are currently in the procurement stage of working with an engagement platform, and it's currently going through the security process with IT. This is a platform that is well used by our local municipalities. It's a well-known engagement platform used by other school boards as well. I've had the opportunity in my previous school board to use it as well, and we're going through that. It will be funded through current communications budget we will be able to find room for it within current budgets.
I recognize Trustee Morton.
Thank you. We're now recommending that we review every 5 years. How does that compare with past practice?
Thank you. That's a great question. We didn't have a consistent review practice prior to the initiation of this framework. So this will be a fairly new change for DDSB. It provides consistency. It is an ambitious goal to have all of our current policies and procedures implemented into this 5-year cycle, but we are working with some accountability measures at the admin council table that we believe are going to help us streamline that. But we did, to answer your question, we didn't have a consistent practice prior to engaging in this policy framework review.
Then I say thank you, and I think the 5-year review is an excellent idea. As well, I like your communication and implementation plan. I think that we need to do that and provide all the mechanisms to collect and consolidate community feedback as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Morton. Are there any other trustees wanting to make a comment or ask questions? Seeing no further questions or requests to speak, are we ready to vote on the motion? Okay, using your cards or your hands or you're online, can I please show a hands of all those in favor? Thank you. That motion is carried. Okay, we will now move to our next item. We have the mandatory meeting requirements, and I will turn that over to General Counsel Cotter.
Thank you very much, and through you, Chair. So the report can be found starting at page 36 of your agenda package. And we also, Jillian also circulated an additional document this afternoon, went into your inbox around 1:30 this afternoon. So the issue is this. So you'll recall that under the new OREG 46397, that there are now mandatory meeting requirements for regularly scheduled board meetings and meetings of the committee of the whole. When we did our revisions to the bylaws to be compliant with the new regulation, the language is such that the closed session meetings that occur before board and before the standing committee of the whole are not included in the definition of mandatory meetings. And we did that on the basis that those closed session meetings were often very short, and that maybe a new approach going forward would be not to schedule them routinely every 2 weeks, but to schedule them as and when needed. And on that basis, we said, well, they're not regularly scheduled and therefore would not be included in the definition of mandatory meetings. So far so good until we get to the organizational meeting. At the organizational meeting, we brought forward a schedule that the board approved that included all the closed session meetings as regularly scheduled meetings. So now there's a bit of an incongruity now between the language in the bylaw and the fact that we have an approved schedule of meetings that includes each of the 6 o'clock meetings that occur before standing and board. So, you know, I think this gives the board the committee a chance to look at this issue again, which I think is probably fair, because you'll recall when we brought this forward, I think this was a topic of discussion, but we had to make sure we were compliant with the regulation. So the bylaw was amended and we're compliant. And now this issue, I think, gives the committee and the board a chance to look at it a little deeper and decide how they want to proceed. So there are 2 options. One option is to amend the definition in the bylaws to include those closed session meetings as being mandatory and leave them in the annual schedule. The other option is to amend the schedule. That's what I've said in the report. However, in what I've circulated today through Jillian is kind of a third option, which is the bylaw amendment that I'm proposing is general. And so I think what I'm suggesting is you can make this amendment and then it's whatever the board does at the annual meetings. So the amendment is broad enough to cover closed session meetings if they're approved annually. They would be called mandatory. If they're not approved annually, they would not be mandatory. So it just depends what you're regularly scheduling. And I think that's fair, because the intent is if trustees have notice of it and know about the meeting, they should build that into their schedule and they should attend. So if you look at the email that Jillian sent, if you have that in front of you, it starts on section 4 of the bylaw. And so 4.2.6, proposing to amend to say that the committee of the whole meetings, so we had that language originally that said they're not scheduled regularly, they're just going to be called when they're needed. But I've added language now that says committee of the whole meetings may also be scheduled and included in the annual calendar of meetings if they are prior to any regular board or regular committee of the whole standing meetings. So that way we're not catching any other meetings that are not before those 2 bi-weekly meetings. So that way we're including committee of the whole meetings could be included in that setup. Then we have to jump down to 5.7.2, and we're saying there that the regular committee of the whole meeting that would now be mandatory can include any other meeting that's set out in the schedule that's approved at the annual meeting. So this way, I think this language that we're recommending now, I think gives the board the flexibility each year to decide what's going to be a regularly scheduled meeting for the closed session meetings, and then to schedule that as needed. So I think the amendment solves that problem. So at this point, I'm recommending that the committee does adopt the suggested amendments. Then the next thing the committee will have to do is decide what to do with the schedule, because under this new language now, the approved schedule means that all those closed session meetings are scheduled and will be mandatory. So if the committee does not want that, then the committee also needs to amend the schedule. You could do that by removing all the closed session meetings or by removing some of them. For example, you could say, well, let's make the ones that are before board mandatory, and then we'll see if we need the ones that are before standing. That could be an option for the board, for the committee as well. So, and the schedule of meetings, just so you know, is at page 89 of your package. And we've included some of the historical information just to bring your mind back to how we got here, although I don't think we need to go through that in any detail. It's just in case anybody wanted to reference it. The key document really is what Jillian sent out by email. So you can see why I'm remote tonight. So subject to any questions you may have, that is our report on this, and I would welcome your questions. I'm sure there will be some. We can work through this issue.
Okay, trustees, thank you, Council Cotter. At this time, before we address the recommended action, I'd like to ask if there are trustees that have any questions for Council Cotter. Okay, I recognize Trustee Thatcher and then Trustee Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Okay. I think that Trustee Edwards had her hand up first, but if she's okay, I'll just go ahead. If she's okay with that. I know we've had discussion around this particular Committee of the Whole meeting as to whether or not it's mandatory. I think I just wanted to confirm that my understanding of that meeting is correct. I've always understood, excuse me, that meeting, the Committee of the Whole meeting prior to board, is actually a part of the board meeting, but is the private session portion. And then the same with standing. The Committee of the Whole meeting prior to standing would be an extension of that meeting, but the in-camera session. I'm just wondering, Chair, if I could have some clarification on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that. And I think, Trustee Thatcher, what you're discussing was the historical practice at the board, and is the practice that some boards do adopt. When we revised the bylaws, wherever it was now, 4 or 5 years ago, you know, the board decided at that time to get sort of rid of that artifice, because it's the fact of the matter is it is a committee meeting. And if we know we're going to have a committee meeting and we have an agenda for it, then it can be scheduled as a Committee of the Whole meeting. The agenda can go out, and there's no need to go into board first and then to move into committee. Because of course the board cannot meet in closed session. Only committees can, only the Committee of the Whole can. So we know it's going to be a Committee of the Whole meeting, and we know it's going to be closed session. So what the bylaws currently contemplate, and this is the way it's been since we went through the major amendments, I can't remember the exact date, I think it was 2021, that the committee meetings, Committee of the Whole meetings are subject to their own agenda and are scheduled separately, and then we don't have to bother going into a public board meeting and moving into committee and then going into a different room, and it just makes it a little bit easier. We circulate the agenda, we know it's a committee meeting, we know it's closed session. So that is currently the framework that we're operating under.
Does that answer your question, Trustee Thatcher?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I recognize Trustee Edwards. My apologies.
No problem. Thank you. And I definitely am in favor of the changing of the bylaw, because I think I have previously stated that I think Committee of the Whole and camera meetings are important for trustees to attend. as we have a fiducial responsibility, and we talk about we talk about labor, we talk about basically legal and some financial matters within that realm. And so I would say that I prefer the changing of the bylaws, and then as Councillor Cotter said, that we can then look at the schedule, and then if we choose to do so, we can change some of those committee of the wholes as not eliminate some of those committee of the whole meetings if we wish. At that time, it gives us the flexibility to do that.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. Are there any other questions for Council Cotter?
So I can't see in the boardroom, but if there are no other questions, then my suggestion, Chair Miller, is that you first see if you can get a motion on the amending the language in the bylaw as it's tracked, and then a separate motion can be brought after that to address the schedule, the approved schedule. So, but before doing that, I should point out there is one other change that I'm suggesting. Would be the section 4.2.8, delete it, because it talks about quorum and that if a trustee can't attend, they're to notify the trustee coordinator, which both of those are redundant and are picked up elsewhere, and it makes it a little bit confusing. So that's the additional change. So Jillian, you do have I'm just looking at this, sorry, 4.2.6. And yeah, you do have 4.2.8 there as well. Okay. Be amended and section 4.2.8 be removed. Yeah, okay. So that language there has what's in the draft document that's been circulated.
Thank you, Council Cotter. Now we have the recommended motion on the screen. If we can have a trustee to move the recommended action on the screen, that the Governance and Policy Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that section 4.26 and 5.7.2 be amended, section 4.2.8 be removed, and that the matter proceed to the board at its next regular meeting. May I have a trustee to move the recommended action? Thank you, Trustee Dracula. The motion has been moved. Are there any further discussions or questions from trustees? Seeing none, we will now call the vote. All those in favor, can you raise your hand online? Thank you. That motion is carried. We will now turn back to our next report, which is the updates.
Sorry, Trustee Miller, Chair Miller, sorry. Before you move on, if I could take the committee, with your permission, Chair, to page 89 of the agenda package, which includes the approved schedule of meetings. So, given the wording of the bylaw now, this schedule includes all the 6 o'clock meetings. So before board and standing. So if it's the desire of the committee to allow some of those to be scheduled as and when needed, then they should be removed from this mandatory schedule, and they can be dealt with as and when there's a need to have that meeting. So that issue is, I think, before you as well, and given the report we provided. So Chair Miller, you may want to see if there's somebody who's prepared to move a motion to amend the meeting schedule as set out on page 89 of the agenda package.
Thank you, Council Cotter, for that clarification. As proposed, and as we have just proceeded with the previous motion, can I have a trustee willing to move and to amend the scheduled calendar of dates of meetings on page 89? Trustee Brown. Now we can call the vote. Can I see all those in favor?
Sorry, I don't know if there was a discussion that occurred off microphone, but at least for those of us online, we don't know what the amendment is being suggested. Is it to remove all closed session meetings from the schedule, or only some?
Sorry, I'm going to ask for clarification from you, Council Cotter. Can we get clarification around what exactly it is that we will be amending on the schedule? Are we removing dates? Thank you.
Well, it's, yeah, no, not removing dates, but removing the first line of each of the scheduled meetings, if you want, removing what's referred to as the 6 p.m. in-camera session on each of those dates. So there's a 6 p.m. session before, for example, there's a 6 p.m. session before the January 5th Standing Committee meeting. So really what you're looking at is what does the committee want to delete from the far right column? Nothing's going to be removed from the first column, the date column, or the nature of the meeting column. What would be deleted potentially is the time, anything that says 6 p.m. and then the language beside it in camera. So what of those does the committee want to delete? For example, if the committee decided we want to have the closed session meetings before board meetings as being mandatory, so we have at least one of those a month, but we don't want them to be mandatory for standing. We may need them, we may not. Then the motion would be to delete reference to the 6 p.m. in-camera sessions before, as set out next to each of the standing committee meetings on the calendar, for example. Or the motion could be we want to remove all the 6 p.m. meetings from the calendar, or it could be we want to remove some of them or none of them. So it's a bit difficult for me to craft specifically what the committee wants to do, because I don't know what, we don't have a recommendation. It's really, this is totally within the bailiwick of the trustees in terms of how they want to manage this issue. But the deletion would be to delete the 6 p.m. in-camera sessions from the following. And then it's blank, blank. If somebody wants to amend, if there's an interest in removing some of those from the mandatory schedule. If there is no interest, if everybody's happy that those be mandatory, then there's no need to amend the schedule.
If I may, Chair, I'm just considering the fact that trustees are only just now contemplating what the amendment may look like, and none of this comes into play until the board undertakes the recommendation of this committee in January. So given that the board has now, or the governance committee has now made the decision that they will that they want to see the bylaws amended, my recommendation at this point is that the trustees might charge the staff with going back to bring back a recommendation for what that amendment could look like. We can bring it back to board, at which time it could be discussed, and the trustees then may be in a better position to approve or amend the recommendations or how that schedule looks. At the moment, this committee has recommended that the bylaws be changed, and that's clear. But I'm suggesting that perhaps the staff might bring back some recommendations for how the structure may be, the calendar may be amended, and then contemplate it at board at the same time that the recommendation from this committee is also contemplated at board.
Yeah, if I may, Chair Miller, the only caveat I would add to that is that we should be operating on until that happens, we should be operating on the assumption, that the January 5th, 6 p.m. meeting is mandatory. Until that change is made, then anything on this list should be treated as mandatory.
Thank you, Director Williams-Taylor, and thank you, Council Cotter. I will now turn to Trustee Brown.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So maybe I've misunderstood. So my understanding is that the in-camera sessions, regardless of whether or not it's before standing or the regular session, would be called if needed. So it wouldn't be on this list, and we would only call an in-camera meeting when it's needed. And we would know if it was needed because we have our agenda setting, and usually at that point, we should know whether or not there'll be in-camera items. So I know that we've kind of gone round in a circle, but it's almost like, are we just removing them and then calling in camera when we need one? Or is it that someone's going to make a decision that we don't have one in January or February or March, but then that goes against whether or not we could just call one? So it's either, I feel like it should be, either we have it on there or we don't. Not, there doesn't seem like there's an in-between, if I've heard correctly.
Through you, Chair Miller. So, is it there's a distinction between, I guess, whether there's going to be a meeting, which is one question, and the second question is it going to be mandatory? So, what we had contemplated when we came with the bylaws last time was that we wouldn't have them on the mandatory scheduled meeting list, and that they would be called, maybe a month in advance or something as needed, as you say, through agenda setting, and we could still have those meetings, but they would not be on the approved schedule, which makes them mandatory. That's what was contemplated, but as I say, that's the way the language was, and then this came forward with them on all of them on the schedule. So, we needed to deal with that, as I said in the report, that incongruity. So the way that it's been dealt with is the bylaws are now generic enough to include them or not include them, right? The amendment, now the bylaw is good, it's clean, and it's neutral. Those can be included as mandatory or not. So if the board wants them to be mandatory, they don't have to touch the schedule. If you want them not to be mandatory, you have to remove them from the schedule. But you can still call them an agenda setting, and we'd still have 6 o'clock meetings. They just wouldn't be mandatory. So it's just a question. It's not a question of whether we have the meetings or not. It's just a question of whether you want them mandatory or not.
Thank you, Council Cotter. Trustee Brown, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. I will now turn to Trustee Morton and then to Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I appreciate our director's ideas. I would like to follow through with that. And that would mean our first meeting in January is going to be mandatory. And then at the board meeting, we're going to discuss that. And I think we would have our 12 trustees there, and I would appreciate the input of everybody.
Trustee Thatcher? Trustee Thatcher, you're muted.
I got it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also appreciate the suggestion that the directors put forward, although I don't know whether that'll be something that is easy for staff, as most of staff are not really part of that meeting. I'm just wondering, without really having a lot of time to think about it, and I mean that it's certainly true. It's kind of come to us here at this meeting without a lot of opportunity to think about it in advance. It seems to me that it would be, just thinking from off the top of my head, it would be easier for us to cancel those meetings, those in-camera meetings, because I mean, traditionally we've always had those meetings, and we've had an agenda for each of them. So just thinking off the top of my head, I would think that it would be easier to cancel certain meetings rather than to add the ones that we feel we should have. That's just kind of my thinking. Having said that, I do agree the January meetings should be mandatory. I don't have a problem with any of the meetings that are on the list unless we decide to cancel. I don't have a problem with those being mandatory either. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any further questions or discussion from trustees? At this time, if there's none, I need to have a trustee that is willing either to make a motion to adjust the scheduled calendar or to, under the advisement of Director Williams-Taylor, to charge the staff to bring forward a recommendation to the board. Trustee Morton, will you be making a motion?
I will put forward that motion.
Would you like me to repeat that so we could have it on the screen?
I would like it to be on the screen.
Okay, the motion is that we, as trustees, direct staff to come back with proposed calendar for contemplation with January 5th Committee of the Whole being required or mandatory.
Can we have a recorded vote, please, Chair?
Yes. Jillian, do you need to have that repeated? Thank you very much, Jillian. The motion has been moved by Trustee Morton. I would now like to call the vote as a recorded vote, sorry. Just before we vote, for those online, as we have majority of our members online, can we ask our online members to call out their vote verbally when they're called?
Thank you, Chair. I'll call the recorded vote. Trustee Brown?
In favor.
Thank you. Trustee Cowie?
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Edwards?
In favor.
Thank you. Trustee Jackula?
In favor.
Thank you. Trustee Linton?
In favor.
Thank you. Trustee Morton?
In favor?
Thank you. Trustee Oldfield?
In favor.
Thank you. Trustee Thatcher?
Opposed?
Thank you. And Chair Miller?
In favor.
Thank you. So we have 8 trustees in favor, 1 trustee not in favor, and 3 trustees absent. I'm sorry, 2 trustees absent.
Thank you, Recording Secretary. The motion is carried. We will now proceed to our updates to the trustee expense policy, and I will turn it over to Associate Director David Wright.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. We have provided draft amendments that we believe satisfy the key aspects of the trustee motion, namely providing flexibility for trustees to participate in professional development activities, engage with community while maintaining a similar budget to the amount currently budgeted for, and we feel we have done so in a responsible way that minimizes risk to trustees and to the organization. Certainly there's an opportunity to further the strategic plan by enhancing community connection through these policy changes, but not totally without risk, some of which are noted in Section 7 of the report. The draft amendments show in Section 6.4.1 sub 3 and Section 6.4.4 sub 2. 6.4.1 sub 3 is intended to create a mechanism for trustees to offset their costs of attending and participating in community events when there is not an opportunity in advance of that event for trustees to receive approval. Some examples that I was provided and for you to consider, trustees attending meetings with constituents, MPPs, or attending a town hall. These meetings are often scheduled on short notice, predicated by an emergent situation, and a connection can often easily be drawn between attending the event and furthering the role of trustee. So the current policy language does allow for trustees to receive approval in advance of attending a community event or activity. In these emergent situations, it would not be possible. The draft language that we've included allows for the retroactive application. You'll notice that there is no reference to reimbursement for refreshments or catering and hospitality. This is really focused on mileage and any costs related to admission into an event. 6.4.4 sub 2, as I mentioned earlier, this amendment is intended to provide trustees access to a broader variety of funded professional development opportunities. The dollar value included here of $1,000 is tied to the historical average amount spent by trustees and budgeted for trustee PD. This section signals that trustees would have to replace the participation in OPSPA events if they chose to participate in an alternative event or events, with the intention of maintaining that historical level of spending and budgeting. I'm hopeful that these draft amendments are clear and sufficient to cover all of the bases that were included in that motion. Would be really happy to receive feedback from trustees on these draft amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Associate Director David Wright. I will now ask for a trustee to move the recommended action before we have discussion. Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. Moved by Trustee Thatcher, again, I'll read it, is the recommended action. The recommended changes to the trustee expense policies to support the October 29, 2025 trustee motion. Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. As the first mover of the motion, I will now give you the floor to speak if you wish.
Thank you, Chair. I have one clarifying question. Am I understanding it correctly that that would be up to $1,000? Is that correct, or am I misreading that?
Through you, Madam Chair, Trustee Thatcher, the second section, the professional development related section, is limited to $1,000. So that's in addition to the discretionary amount of $1,000. And the $1,000, the genesis of the $1,000 is that happens to be close to the average amount trustees have spent over the last number of years, and that close to the amount that we actually budget for trustee PD. So yes, it is limited to $1,000.
Thank you for clarifying that. I would be in favor of that motion.
Trustee Linton, then Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, and thank you for this draft. I think I'm a little confused just because, to my understanding, there is a certain amount that is set out for OPSPA-related events that is above and beyond, I guess, $2,000 per calendar year. And if I'm understanding correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this would allow an additional $1,000 upon the $1,000 that's allotted as discretionary for professional development, but that's still way under the amount that we have as the cap for to attend OPSPA-related events. So maybe the question is, what is the risk of removing that cap altogether, and then trustees having the autonomy to direct whether they want all of their professional development, above the 2,000 to be, directed one way versus attending any of the OPSPA events. And I guess I'm asking that because if I think about the OPSPA AGM and if I attend PES after the public education symposium, those events are probably above and beyond $2,000 after accommodation, registration, and mileage per se. So definitely we've got to know each other, and you're super risk averse. So just wondering what was the risk or why you put that cap of the $1,000 as opposed to having no cap.
Yeah, and I'm really happy to dig into this one because I may not have been clear. So to get to so we do budget an average of $1,000 per trustee for professional development. So to get to an average, you need highs and you need lows. The reality is, over the last number of years, some trustees participate in OPSPA professional development, some don't. So when you look at an average for all trustees, it averages out to $1,000 per trustee. So you do have some that spend $3,000. You do have some that spend none. So that is the average amount that is spent and that is budgeted for. So the risk of removing that in its entirety is that you won't meet the third request in the trustee mandate of maintaining the same budget overall. Because if you provide more flexibility, more access to professional development, I think you do run the risk of spending more as a board of trustees on professional development than you have historically. So that's why that cap's there, Trustee Linton. That is reflective of the actual average the trustees have spent, and I think I looked at the last 5 years of Trustee PD.
Supplementary?
Trustee Linton, yes.
So through you, Chair, I would say I use my I statement here. I haven't used any, or I haven't attempted to use anything more than the $1,000 because my understanding is that we didn't have access to it. So, we'd attend an event where we're able to connect with other parliamentarians in Ottawa and discuss pertinent issues at that point to the Black community. But that would essentially wipe out that discretionary budget, and above and beyond that, there was no other fund available. Like, we weren't able to access more. So it wasn't, for me, it wasn't that I didn't or wouldn't have wanted to access for more professional development. I was following kind of our bylaws, which stated that I couldn't. So I guess whereas I get what you're saying with the cap, I'm also, I guess, wondering what that would look like for, again, trustees to have full discretion over that professional development, whether they use, and I'm not saying to increase the amount by any stretch of the imagination. I'm saying we could either put the entire amount towards OPSPA related events, or it could go to other professional development opportunities.
So Trustee Linton, what I'm trying to tell you is that that is the total amount. So some trustees may spend more, but on average, trustees spend $1,000 a year on professional development, OPSPA related professional development. So with this amendment, potential amendment, trustees would have full discretion over, not full discretion, with approval in advance, similar to the discretionary amount. Trustees would have access to $2,000 for professional development that they could direct to whatever professional development they wished, as long as it was relevant to the role of trustee and approved in advance by the Board of Trustees. I totally hear what you're saying, but the reality is, if we remove that limit, trustees would likely spend more on professional development than they currently do. I was just trying to stay within the parameters of the motion and keep it at that same level.
Trustee Linton, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Associate David Wright. I'll now move to Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm looking at 6.4.2 gifts. We're not in the habit of providing gifts, so I'm wondering if we need to include this. And the statement that says trustees may be reimbursed for gifts of appreciation that are of nominal value. That's questionable terminology to me, so I would just like to delete the 2 sentences on gifts.
Thanks. Through you, Madam Chair. I think that's a fine suggestion. Trustee Morton wasn't contemplated through the motion, but if trustees wish to put that motion on the floor this evening, totally within their purview.
Thank you.
If I may chime in, Chair Miller, just to pick up on Trustee Morton's point, gifts are covered off in the Code of Conduct. So the ability to accept nominal. So I'm just saying it may be redundant to include it in this as well. Anyway.
So what is your recommendation,
Well,
Councillor
I'm just
Collins?
saying you were suggesting it be deleted, and I think that's something that could be done because all the gift requirements, whether trustees can accept it, the nominal value, et cetera, that's all set out in detail in the Code of Conduct. So really the expense policy is not necessarily a place to look for that anyway.
But this isn't about accepting gifts, it's about giving gifts.
Ah, okay, yes, sorry. I didn't pick up on that nuance. That's not in the Code of Conduct.
Thank you, Councillor Cotter.
That's not in the Code of Conduct.
Trustee Morton, would you like to make a motion to amend the section 6.4.2 to remove that section?
I would like to make that motion, or that amendment to the motion, yes.
Okay, you can make your motion. You may make your motion.
I would like to delete 6.4.2. The heading is gifts.
Okay, the motion has been moved by Trustee Morton. Okay,
So I have my hand up to speak, Trustee Morton?
yes, but we have a motion on the floor currently, so
Yes.
you'd
And
like to
I
comment on the motion?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll take Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. I have no problem removing the second. I'm not going to vote in favor of doing that. The second sentence. I think that we do need a statement saying that we generally do not provide gifts because it's not covered anywhere else. So I just think put gifts there and just saying we generally not provide it. That's simple. We don't need the other part is redundant, if not contradictory when you talk about they may be reimbursed for gifts of appreciating that are of nominal value. So I'd rather just say that gifts are generally not provided by individual trustees. It's clear. Anybody coming in new understands that. So I do not, the way the current motion is stated, I would not be in favor.
I'm in total agreement with Trustee Edwards. Yes, let's delete that final statement.
And keep the first one, Trustee Morton, just, sorry.
Yes.
Are there any objections to the proposed amendment by Trustee Edwards? Okay, can we call the vote? Those in favor to the amended motion on the policy of 6.42 to have it read as gifts are generally not provided by individual trustees as is. Can we have a vote on that? Okay, can we have our voting cards? Those in favor? Online? That motion is carried. Thank you. Now we are back to the main motion. Is there any further discussions or questions on the main motion? Okay, Trustee Linton. And, sorry, Trustee Edwards, and then Trustee Linton.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions actually for clarification and just to understand under the 6.4.1 3 where it says it's not practical to obtain. So just putting this into practice, that means if I attend a ward meeting, then I would have to come to the board and get approval after the fact at a public meeting. Is that correct, my understanding?
Through you, Madam Chair. Trustee Edwards, that is correct. I understand that historically trustees have participated in those meetings, and as I indicated in my comments, there is a fairly easy correlation to draw between trustees acting in their role as a trustee and attending that sort of community event or meeting. But under historical policy language 6.4.1, those were always to be approved in advance. So they were probably approved out of order because it wasn't directly in alignment with the policy. So the language as it states right now is that reimbursement of any sort to attend those types of meetings does need to be approved by the Board of Trustees, whether it's in advance or retroactively. That's the draft language we've included there because we tried to be tight and concise in the language. And that's what we landed with.
Trustee Edwards, does that answer your question?
That one, I have one other, trustee Nolan.
Supplemental?
On the different, on the other amendment, which is, I guess, on 6.4.4.2. And I really like some clarification when it says relevant to the role of trustee. Who is going to be deciding whether it's relevant to the role? And I might suggest that we include, and I know we don't like to refer directly to the Education Act because it changes, but I really think we need to include basically under the roles and responsibilities and the duties of the board of 218.1 of the Education Act and 169.1 of the Education Act. I think that would clearly outline as far as trustees what their roles are so that somebody could determine whether what it is relevant to the role of trustee. I think that right now that's part of the issue is that we don't know it's not clearly defined what is relevant to the role of trustee.
Madam Chair, if I can just quickly, through you, Trustee Edwards, the intention was that trustees would determine what was relevant to the role of trustee through that approval process. Although I think your point is well taken, that the reference to the Education Act really is to the definition of trustee. So I think it certainly may be appropriate there. I just think notionally trustees may need different things to support their particular ward or et cetera, just based on feedback that we've had from trustees. So anyway, the intention of the language is that trustees themselves would determine at the meeting whether or not the professional development was relevant.
Thank you, Associate Director David Wright. Any more comments or questions from trustees? Seeing none, I would now like to call the vote on the main motion.
Sorry, Chair. I couldn't find my hand.
That's okay.
Thank you. I just want to be clear, though, about what the extra additional PD is referring to here. When I was thinking about this, I was just thinking about the tremendous amount of professional development that we've had, and the director has given trustees opportunity through the committee and directly to her to bring forward recommendations as to the kind of professional development that they want. And also we've just recently been through quite a number of online sessions as well through OESC. So I was initially wasn't sure what we meant by additional professional development, but then then the word community. So these are events in the community, and I always have agreed that trustees need to be out there in the community. So I think we're talking about something that would be an opportunity, and I think one of the examples you gave, Associate Director Wright, was town hall meetings, and meeting with groups of parents and that sort of thing. So I would certainly be in favor of that. But I think as far as the professional development that we've been given, it's certainly very, very comprehensive and open also always to suggestions on the part of trustees.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. Are there any further comments from trustees? Seeing none, can we now call the vote?
Sorry, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if Trustee Edwards was proposing an amendment to the language that's currently in there. So before we take a vote, if we could perhaps confirm that. And one other thing, I've noticed an error in the language included in 6.4.4 sub 1. Sorry, 6.4. The reference in the highlighted section is to section 5.4.5 discretionary. With apologies, that should be 6.4.5 discretionary. The policy template changed, but the language, the draft language did not change to reflect the updated ordering or numbering in the policy. So just so everybody's aware, the reference there should be to the article immediately below 6.4.5, with apologies for that error.
Thank you, Associate Director David Wright. I just want to return to Trustee Edwards, if you have suggested language or you were making a suggestion.
No, I think that because we say it basically, it's still the reimbursement is basically goes through the approval process. It still has to go to the board approval at this point in time. So I think that that is fine. However, I just raised some cautionary concerns when we get a brand new group of trustees, with them not understanding what is relevant to the role. It's a risk to me. It's a risk not including that it's relevant to the role as set out in the Education Act, 2.18, 218.1 and 161.1 of the Education Act. I think it should be in there, but I'm fine. I just find it's a risk. That's all. That's just my thoughts. And if nobody else has a problem with it, we're talking governance here. If I think that I should be included when it comes to following the policy, I'd go at the board level. But at this time, it's a risk to me not including that.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. I'm just going to return to Associate Director David Wright. If you do please clarify the section that required the changed language on section 6.4.5 so that we can have the new language or the accurate language.
You bet, Madam Chair. So on page 34 of the report, policy section 6.4.4 sub 2, the last two lines, reimbursement under this section is in addition to any reimbursement claimed under section 5.4.5 discretionary. That reference is incorrect. It should reference 6.4.5 discretionary, with apology.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, seeing that we have had that clear and we have answered questions, are there any further comments from trustees? Seeing none, at this point, I'd like to call the vote. If we can show our cards and our hands, all in favor? Thank you. That motion is carried. At this time, we have no further business. Oh, sorry. I was ahead of myself. Just clarifying. So at this time, we don't have any further business. May I have a motion to conclude our meeting? Thank you, Trustee Morton. All in favor? My apologies. We have 2 information items this evening, and that is on our list on pages 90 to 115. We do have, again, General Counsel Cotter on our board motions. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair Miller. Yes, as Chair Miller noted, the report can be found commencing at page 90 of your agenda package. As has become the board's practice, staff provide an annual report to the Governance and Policy Committee confirming the motions that were brought to standing and board. And the list starts at page 93 and includes both the outcome of the motion, whether it was carried or not, as well as a status column, so that the committee and the trustees are able to track whether there's still pending action on the various matters that have come to board and standing committee. So subject to any questions you may have, that is the provided for your information in terms of having a documented record of all the matters that have come to board and standing over the year between the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Cotter. Are there any questions from trustees regarding this information item? Seeing none, we will move to the second information item. That is our community engagement review and next steps. And I'll turn to Senior Manager Galen Eagle and our Senior Policy Advisor, Sharia Banajea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is essentially a status report to bring you an update on where we stand on some of the work we've been undertaking with respect to an engagement framework, or the development of an engagement framework. So this report is a response to the May 2025 board motion that directed this Governance and Policy Committee to review and update policies related to community engagement and the seeking of feedback that directly impacts school communities. So this report, and I won't go through it verbatim, but it provides an overview of work completed to date, including enhancements to the policy development process that we spoke about earlier in this meeting, updates to governance level engagement practices, and a jurisdictional scan of engagement approaches across other Ontario school boards. It outlines areas where DDSB engagement practice can be strengthened, including communications, consultation, and school-level community engagement. So this report ultimately advances a proposal for the development of a community engagement framework that reflects a varied and comprehensive approach to community engagement, building upon and extending existing structures. So as mentioned, this is an information item. I do want to just briefly touch on the jurisdictional scan of other school boards. Had a good opportunity, our staff had a good opportunity to review what other district school boards do in terms of overarching engagement plans. And the findings really affirm, obviously a patchwork of different approaches, but where there are consistencies around the importance of being strategic at both a policy and an operational level to ensure kind of an overall comprehensive approach to engagement that articulates values, addresses expectations, supports different types of levels of engagement, and facilitates participation. So we also did a deep dive into our current policies in terms of what policies exist in our current policy framework that support community engagement. And overall, there are about 4 overarching groupings of policies. In this report, we call them policy domains. So, for example, there's a group of communication policies and procedures, such as the communication policy and the uses of social media. There's government-level policies and procedures, such as the public consultation policy, naming of schools. There's domains within school-level community engagement, so school community councils, the framework for school community council elections, community use of schools, And then there are system-level community engagement structures as well. These are things such as student trustees and student senate policies, and affinity network procedure as well, which is coming to fruition. So overall, what I'd like to now chat a little bit about is the next area of focus, because it's probably your most germane concern here. So the next strategic area for strengthening engagement is DDSB's communication policy framework, including communications policy and the media relations. These policies are in development now, and we hope to be bringing the communications policy to you in the new year, early new year. As part of this work, we also mentioned in the previous discussion around policies and procedures, a core aspect of the engagement policy will be the process of procuring a new software platform that includes an integrated public feedback tools. This will be basically a one-stop shop that creates a systematic, system-level engagement tool for all of the engagement efforts. Now, as we were developing this report, a couple of weeks ago, we got new ministry directive, and that's changed our focus slightly heading into the new year. The Ministry of Education recently announced a new requirement for school boards in terms of engagement, particularly in terms of standardizing and reporting on response times to inquiry. So all school boards are now required to establish a student and family support office in keeping with the requirements outlined in Policy Program Memorandum number 170, School Board Communication with Parents. The new office is to ensure the provision of accurate, relevant, and easy to understand responses that address inquiry directly. A plan for a new office must be submitted in March 2026 and operational by September 1st, 2026. So in terms of immediate next steps, our focus is to develop a process so that we can meet this new compliance. And we thought it behooved us to incorporate that into our overarching engagement process, framework development. Why develop an overarching community engagement framework? It unifies existing engagement-related policies. It defines a continuum of engagement. It formalizes expectation for closing feedback loops. It establishes the basis for a DDSB engagement toolbox, including consultation methods, and it supports a consistent decision-making and transparency across the district. So there are both policy and operational practices to be considered as part of an engagement framework, and this report really is a starting point for moving forward, recognizing there are multiple pieces of work that will help us to achieve this framework. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions that you or any of the trustees may have at this point.
Thank you, Senior Manager Galen Eagle and Senior Policy Advisor Shreya Banerjee. At this time, are there any questions and comments from trustees? I recognize Trustee Edwards.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the work that has gone into there, especially when the landscape is always changing with new releases from the ministry around things, and one of the things that I had brought forward previously that our existing parent communications didn't comply with Regulation 170, around response times. It wasn't mentioned, the response times, and I don't think it's widely known. So this whole thing is really, really good to, a good framework to move forward, developing the framework to move forward. I just had a question, though, around costs. It says, again, costs associated with the new software for engagement feedback are being managed through the existing communication technology budgets. And I'm just wondering, because we also know that the ministry, now this is hardware from what I can figure, has just put out basically around all boards shall go through the central purchasing, the government purchasing, and I'm just wondering if that's going to have an impact on this, because this is supposed to be like a standard office that is presented, and they do require, they want it a part of that setting up the parent support office, student parent support offices, to have a basically a tracking system of information. So I'm just wondering if that's going to be impacted as far as moving that forward with the way purchasing is moved centralized.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, Trustee Edwards. So we are in the early stages of considering what this family and parent information center will look like for DDSB. The one model we will have, however, is that supervised boards are implementing these new centers by January of next year. So we will have an early opportunity to review how those boards have implemented these systems. We will be reaching out, and I have started to reach out to some of the supervised boards who are creating these centers as we speak, and I have our IT services considering what in-house operations we might have that could house this kind of tracking mechanism with technology that we currently have. But it's a little too early for me to say definitively right now what kind of technology we might need to implement or how we will go through that tracking. But we will certainly be in a position to start answering those questions in the early new year.
Thank you. I move to Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm looking at risks and opportunities, and the statements at the end of that paragraph says, there are real opportunities to build stronger relationships through engagement strategies, remove barriers. I'm in favor of that, definitely, but you're new to our board. You've had experience in other boards. I'm curious to know what barriers you see in the Durham District School Board, because we have tried to overcome those barriers for a period of time.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. Thank you for the very difficult question, Trustee Morton. Obviously, I will put I will wear my new employee badge right now as I answer this question. I don't think that in my time here, this is the 1 month mark of my time in this role as of today. I would say the barriers and challenges facing the Durham District School Board are very similar to other similar size public institutions. There can be issues when you don't have an overarching engagement framework. What often happens is you have silos of engagement. So certain different departments might be engaging with different families, but there's not a kind of all-inclusive feel or a transparency or a record of that transparency. I'd also believe that we are dealing in 2025 with a reduced public sentiment towards institutions. So many public sector institutions coming out of the pandemic, reduction in levels of trust. I can only tell you that in my experience in public relations, in my 10 years of experience in public relations, the way to build trust is through proactive two-way communication, and by doing that time and time again. So if we can create a structure where our communities and our key members feel that they are listened to, or at the very least feel that they have avenues towards meaningful engagement, there's no silver bullet, but that is how you build trust with your community. So that is what we're committed to achieving in the next several months, is an overarching engagement plan that really streamlines it and kind of brings almost a one-stop shop for DDSB's engagement over multiple different departments. So that's what I am committing to you this evening.
Perfect. I greatly appreciate your response.
Thank you, and I do too. Excellent response. Okay, we'll move to Trustee Linton.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So rolling through this, I was quite interested in the public consultation piece, which, kind of reviewing the policy. It was last amended in 2006. And has essentially one sentence that the Durham District School Board recognizes the value of public consultation. The board shall conduct appropriate public consultation to ensure that board decisions reflect the values and concerns of the entire community, and that's it. Doesn't speak really to a modality or any strategy of doing this. So I'm just wondering, as part of this review of community engagement and given how important public consultation is, and I think just in when I look at things like violence in schools, we're looking at the consultation of just being with some of our committees, such as the PIC and SEAC, but that doesn't quite represent the entire region of Durham. So I'm just wondering if there's any strategies or any thoughts around doing a deeper dive into our public consultation policy and utilizing some of your learnings from doing deeper dives into other boards to maybe expand on this policy a little more.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, Trustee Linton. So as the report suggests, we don't have a one-stop policy that says this is what consultation looks like throughout the school board. We have a number of policies that address engagement in different ways in different policy domains. What I would like to do is have a little bit of time to see what a framework would look like. That framework could come back to you in a couple months and say, okay, I do believe we need a stronger policy, an overarching engagement policy or procedure. Or I'm presenting to you a framework that, Trustee Linton, if you go under 6.1, understanding public engagement, it has to include inclusivity and accessibility, transparency, respect and responsiveness, collaboration, and continuous improvement. So what I want to present back to you in terms of an engagement framework is our commitment to do those things and to do those throughout the system in a strategic manner. So you're right, we don't have a clear policy currently that says this is how DDSB conducts engagement. I'd like to examine over the next several months what the best way forward is, so that's my answer to that question. Yeah.
Thank you. And just one more, if I could, if there's no other hands. So just again, reviewing this, sorry, this is an area of passion for me, just in terms of being able to engage the broader and general community. But I think one of the things that I also looked at was around the communications, and it does speak about efficient two-way communication. And then when you actually click on the link on that document, you know, again, it's something that was reviewed and amended in 2011. And the, you know, the social media policy actually seems to be very much inward facing. This kind of raised eyebrows for me because we actually use social media on some of our sites as outward facing communication. So, you know, today there was a message that went through Instagram stating that the school buses weren't running in all districts. So I'm wondering if there's any thought around merging or creating policies or procedures around what we're communicating and utilizing and using social media as a communication tool, given its current rise and how utilized it is within our own board.
Through you, Madam Chair, and I really appreciate your passion, Trustee Linton, for engagement, because it's one of my passions as well. And I'll just be straight up with you. The communications policies currently at Durham District School Board are out of date, and that is one of my #1 priorities currently, is to update the communications policy and several procedures. So I do believe you're looking at some out-of-date communications, and as you know, communication changes on a very cyclical basis, almost by month to month. So I would suggest to you that you're going to be seen at this committee among the first slate of policies and procedures, or first slate of policies for your approval in the new year will be around the communications policies. So stay tuned for that.
You are my new best friend. Sorry, David Wright. I found a new friend in the board. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Galen. Thank you, Trustee Linton. Are there any further final comments for this section? Seeing none. At this time, may I have a motion to conclude our meeting? Thank you, Trustee Jackula.
Could I make a statement before we say goodbye?
Absolutely.
I think we should all be thanking Associate Director Wright because this is his last meeting with us. And I think we definitely want to show him how much we've appreciated his contributions to the Durham District School Board.
Wonderful. And I'm going to ask everybody to unmute their mics if they want to say congratulations or clap. Thank you, Associate Director.
Congratulations. You're not offended by not being my best friend anymore, David.
Thank you so much. Now we can conclude our meeting. All in favor? Thank you. That is approved. Have a happy holidays. Our meeting is concluded. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.